In the luxurious silence of a financial empire, an unexpected encounter between a CEO and a forgotten man reveals a truth capable of changing destinies. Among erased memories, silent faith, and unexpected choices, a story of redemption, courage, and the transformative power of compassion is born. The sun had barely risen when Jonathan Reed entered the main lobby of the imposing Reed Enterprises building. At 52, Jonathan had built a financial empire that was envied by many in the market. The 40-story glass and steel building reflected the success of decades of strategic decisions, some of them difficult and unpopular. That Monday morning, Jonathan arrived earlier than usual. He enjoyed those moments of solitude before the corporate hustle and bustle began. The click of his Italian shoes echoed through the polished marble lobby as he adjusted the navy blue silk tie that matched perfectly with his tailored suit. He was on his way to the executive elevator when an unusual sound interrupted his thoughts about the meeting with shareholders scheduled for that afternoon. A muffled sob. Jonathan stopped, annoyed by this breach in his meticulously planned routine. His eyes scanned the area until he located the source, a man sitting alone on one of the benches in the service lobby, in the area reserved for maintenance staff. Driven by uncommon curiosity, Jonathan changed his trajectory. As he approached, he recognized Robert Williams, the janitor who had worked in the building for how many years now? Jonathan couldn't quite remember, but he knew it had been a long time. Robert was a constant presence, always polite, always discreet, always working. Now, however, he was hunched over, his shoulders slumped, and his face buried in his hands. "Williams, any problem?" Jonathan's voice came out rougher than he intended. Robert lifted his face, surprised. His eyes were red and swollen, and he quickly tried to wipe the tears with the back of his rough hands. "Mr. Reed, I'm sorry I didn't." He stood up quickly, embarrassed to have been caught at that moment of vulnerability by the most powerful man in the building. It was then that Jonathan noticed the crumpled paper in Robert's trembling hands. He recognized the company's letterhead and the standardized format of a resignation letter. Something strange happened within Jonathan at that moment, an uncomfortable sensation he hadn't felt in years. "You were fired?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. Robert nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, sir. Yesterday afternoon. They said they are cutting costs, outsourcing the cleaning services." His hands, calloused from decades of hard work, trembled as he held the document. 20 years here. And now I don't know what to do. 20 years. The number hit Jonathan like a punch. He himself had authorized a full audit for operational cost reduction the previous month, but he hadn't followed up on the details of who would be affected. It was just a business decision, numbers on a spreadsheet. "Why are you here if you were laid off yesterday?" Jonathan asked, frowning. "I came to get some personal things from my locker and—" Robert hesitated, then looked directly into Jonathan's eyes with a dignity that contrasted with his simple uniform. "And I wanted to see this place one last time. It was my second home for so long." An uncomfortable silence hung between them. Jonathan noticed a worn notebook next to Robert with folded pages and a worn cover. On it, handwritten, was a verse. "The greatest among you will be your servant." Matthew 23:11. "My daughter, Amelia," Robert continued, breaking the silence. "She got into college last year, first member of the family to get there. I was so proud." His voice faltered. "Now, without this job, I don't know how I'll continue paying. She might have to drop out." Something strange happened inside Jonathan. A distant memory emerged, as if it had been unlocked by a forgotten key. His own father, Antonio Reed, formerly Antonio Rixai, an Italian immigrant, had been a janitor in luxury buildings his entire life. He remembered how he would come home late at night, with calloused hands and the smell of cleaning products ingrained in his skin, yet always with a tired smile. "Son," his father used to say, "never look down on those who serve. They are the ones who uphold the world." Jonathan felt something he hadn't in a long time, shame. He had forgotten his own origins, the sacrifice that allowed him to be where he was today. The words from the verse in Robert's notebook now seemed directed straight at him. "Your daughter, what's her name?" Jonathan asked, his voice softer. Amelia Williams." Robert's face briefly lit up. "She's studying environmental engineering. She's always been brilliant, even when it was just the two of us and things were tough." "Just the two of you?" Jonathan couldn't contain his curiosity. "My wife passed away when Amelia was 8. Cancer." Robert adjusted the collar of his uniform, an automatic gesture of composure. "I raised my girl on my own. I worked extra shifts here to give her what she needed." Another jolt to Jonathan's consciousness. He remembered how many times he had passed by Robert late at night, when everyone else had already left, and the man was still there, cleaning, polishing, taking care of the building as if it were his own home. He had never stopped to ask why. A decision formed in Jonathan's mind, an impulsive, instinctive decision that went against everything he preached about rational and impersonal management. "Mr. Williams, come with me." Robert looked confused but followed Jonathan to the executive elevator, a space he had never occupied before. The janitor seemed out of place in the mirrored and luxurious environment, but he maintained his dignified posture, even in his simple uniform. "Sir, I don't understand." "Just come." The 40th floor housed the main meeting room, where the company's executives were already gathered for the first meeting of the day. As the elevator doors opened, Jonathan could feel Robert's tension beside him. He guided him through the carpeted corridors to the large room with a panoramic view of the city. Upon entering, conversations abruptly ceased. 12 executives in impeccable attire looked surprised at the unlikely figure accompanying the CEO. Melissa Chen, the chief operating officer, was the first to speak. Jonathan were discussing the results of the cost-cutting measures and she stopped, noticing Robert. "Is there a problem?" Jonathan indicated a chair for Robert, who hesitated before sitting timidly on the edge. The contrast was striking. The janitor with calloused hands and a simple uniform amidst executives in suits and advanced technology. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Robert Williams," Jonathan began, remaining standing. He was working in this building for 20 years, until yesterday when he received a termination letter as part of our cost reduction program. The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Gerald Hoffman, the chief financial officer, cleared his throat. "Jonathan, the layoffs were approved according to the strategy you yourself." "I know what I approved," Jonathan interrupted, his voice firm. "But today I realized something important. I approved numbers, not people." Turning to Robert, he continued, "Mr. Williams is not just a janitor. He is the man who has kept this building running flawlessly for 2 decades. The man many of you have seen working overtime to ensure everything was perfect for our meetings with investors. The man who single-handedly raised a daughter who is now in college." Jonathan paused, feeling something change within him. Years of calculated coldness giving way to a different kind of clarity. "When I was a child," he continued, surprising everyone with this unusually personal revelation, "my father was a janitor like Mr. Williams. He cleaned the floors wealthy men walked on so that I could study and one day become one of those men. I forgot that." The room was in absolute silence. Robert looked at his own hands, visibly moved. With an unexpected move, Jonathan approached Robert and, to everyone's shock, knelt before him. "Mr. Williams, I want to ask for forgiveness, not just for your dismissal, but for something deeper, for forgetting who really supports this company. It's not just the investors or the executives, it's people like you." Robert looked stunned at the CEO kneeling in front of him. Melissa Chen let out a gasp of surprise. Gerald Hoffman shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Your dismissal is canceled," Jonathan declared, standing up. "In fact, starting today, you will be our new General Services Supervisor, with a salary increase corresponding to the importance of the role." Robert's eyes widened. "Mr. Reed, I don't know what to say." "I'm not finished," Jonathan continued, turning to face the table of executives. "Reed Enterprises will create a scholarship fund for employees and their children. The first beneficiary will be Amelia Williams, with all her educational costs covered by the company. Gerald Hoffman stood up, visibly tense. Jonathan, this wasn't in the budget. The shareholders will understand that we are investing in our most valuable asset. The people, Jonathan interrupted him. Besides, I will forego my annual bonus if necessary. A stunned silence filled the room. Robert stood still, with silent tears streaming down his face. I prayed for a miracle, he finally said, his voice choked with emotion. I prayed to find a way, and God answered in a way I never imagined. Jonathan felt his own eyes welling up, something that hadn't happened in years. He noticed he wasn't the only one. Melissa Chen discreetly wiped away a tear, and even the stern Gerald Hoffman seemed moved. This meeting is adjourned for today, Jonathan announced. Mr. Williams, let's go to HR to formalize your new position, and I would like to meet your daughter if possible. As they left the room, Jonathan realized that something had changed permanently. It wasn't just Robert's life that was being transformed, it was his own. That evening, when Robert arrived home, the small apartment seemed different. The same worn walls, the same old sofa, but everything was illuminated by a renewed hope. Amelia was at the kitchen table, surrounded by books and notes, her curly hair tied up in a messy bun. At 20, she carried her father's determination and kindness, combined with the sharp intelligence of the mother she could barely remember. Dad, she looked up from her studies, immediately noticing something different. What happened? You're smiling. Robert placed his old backpack on the chair and sat down next to his daughter. On the table was the notebook with the verse, a gift from his late wife that had accompanied him all these years. Amelia, do you remember the prayers we said last night? She nodded. They had prayed together after Robert told her about his dismissal, both trying to find the strength to face what lay ahead. Amelia had already decided, in silence, that she would leave college to work and help her father, although she knew how much it would devastate him. Something happened today that I can't explain any other way but as an answer to our prayers. Robert held his daughter's hands. Not only was I reinstated, I was promoted, and his voice faltered momentarily. And Mr. Reed, the owner of the company, has created a scholarship for you. All your studies are covered now until the end. Amelia looked at her father, incredulous. What do you mean? The CEO? But why? How did this happen? Robert recounted the unbelievable story of that morning, the unexpected encounter, the meeting on the 40th floor, the unthinkable gesture of the CEO kneeling before him. He wants to meet you, Robert concluded. He said your story reminded him of where he came from, of his own father. Amelia, always so controlled and rational, couldn't hold back her tears. She hugged her father tightly, as she did when she was little. All my life I've seen you work so hard, sacrificing everything for me, she whispered. You deserve this, Dad. You deserve to be seen, to be valued. Robert stroked his daughter's hair, remembering how his wife used to do the same gesture. For a moment, he felt her presence there, as if she were also witnessing this moment of redemption. On the table, the open notebook showed the verse worn out by time, but whose words seemed more alive than ever. The greatest among you shall be your servant. Robert had always found solace in these words, which dignified his work even on the toughest days. Now, however, they had acquired a new meaning. They spoke not only about serving with humility, but also about how true greatness manifests in unexpected moments, when barriers are broken down and hardened hearts reopen. Outside, the city continued its frenetic pace. On the 40th floor of the Reed Enterprises building, Jonathan Reed looked out the panoramic window, contemplating not the skyscrapers that made up the skyline, but the lesson he had learned that day. On his desk was an old framed photograph that he hadn't displayed in years. His father, Antonio, in his janitor's uniform, proudly smiling on the day of his son's graduation. Next to the photo, a new memo awaited approval. Employee Appreciation and Development Program, Reed Enterprises. The true change, Jonathan realized, was not just in the company's new policies, but in the hearts of the people who comprised it, starting with his own.